Good morning, good morning. It's 9 o'clock, so I will call the Thursday, October 6th council meeting to order. And this is for the purpose of, is she out there? Oh. For the purpose of continuation with our capital budget. So with that, out there. I will do a land acknowledgement that the City of Fort Saskatchewan is located within Treaty 6 territory and Métis of Alberta Region 4, the ancestral and traditional territory of the Nihilwak, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, and Métis. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. It is because of our treaty relationship that we can live, work, and play on Treaty 6 territory. Thank you. So, the process today, there are no delegations that have registered for today. So the process for the continuation of the capital budget, because we basically got through everything that we needed to on Monday, so we will move on to the flagged items. So our individuals, departments are with us. So when I come to the item, I will ask the person who flagged it if they have questions, further questions. The feedback or the comments were provided to council through an email. And then if there's further questions, they can be answered by the department heads. If anybody wishes to move something to be removed to a later date, any motions, this is the meeting that you would put the motion on. We would discuss and debate it and go from there, and that would be the direction for administration. And I understand there's a couple of potential notice of motions, so that would be at the very end. If there's anything left that you haven't seen in here that you would like to have as part of the budget, then you would make the notice of motion so that we can actually get it on for discussion and debate at the next meeting. So with that, we will begin, and I will acknowledge that Councillor Blizzard is joining us virtually. So the first item that we have is Veterans Way Corridor Widening 19009. Councillor Kelly, you put this one on for additional questions. And if you'd like to push your button. Okay.
I have still concerns about the sight lines at the intersections, the two in particular. I think your comments indicated that they're within standards. What are standards? What are the standards?
Your worship, the Councillor Kelly, and I'm not going to quote a distance because I'll get it wrong. But it is calculated based on speed and stopping distance, reaction time, stopping distance, those kinds of things as you approach the intersection. So that evaluation's been completed.
That has been, and obviously then it met requirements. Okay, would it be expensive, Grant, to change those two?
It would be very expensive actually, because you'd have to either drop the grade of the Veterans Way or raise the grade of the approach roads.
I kind of figured so. Moving the timing of phase 2 up. When I read your comments, it seems to me that if we started phase 2 in 24, we might find we're creating an issue if the Dow expansion goes ahead.
Your worship, Councillor Kelly, and I maybe didn't word it quite right. The issue would be there's some regulatory things that we need to get approved to be able to cross the creek, which we don't have control over timelines. And we can't start that regulatory process until we get to a certain level of design, detailed design within that area. So we wouldn't be starting detailed design until January of 23 for phase 2. We could make that probably looking at making that application mid-23. Assuming everything fell into place, we'd be good to go for construction in 24. But if we didn't get that approval, we'd have to kind of hold off until that came. we wouldn't want to start until we had all those approvals in terms of the construction itself.
And I get it. We ought not to, and we couldn't start until we get the approvals. Do you think the approvals realistically take that long, Grant?
Your Worship, Councillor Kelly, sometimes they do. We don't have a lot of. It's a Department of Fisheries and Oceans thing, so sometimes they do, sometimes they're quick. It depends on what they're looking at.
I'm anxious to see it expedited, but I don't think we can, so I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask if there's any other questions, comments, or requests on the Veterans Way. And actually, I'll just go through the list. We said we were going to do that, so I'll actually go next. Are you absolutely certain that this is required? Whoops. I'll make sure everybody's phones and everything are turned off.
Your Worship, all the data that we have, all the analysis we've done shows that it's something that's needed now, or will be within the next 2 or 3 years. We're hitting those thresholds where those triggers are being met in terms of having these kinds of this widening in place, especially with phase 1 and the other safety improvements we can get as part of that. I feel it's something that's important to do now.
Okay, and I guess the other question that I have, because the one comment that you made was, if we don't do this, people are going to shortcut. So as we see, every time they do any construction on the highway, they close off and bring it down to 1 lane anyway. So is it not... are you not doing the same impact that you're saying that even if you do this to 3 lanes, you're going to have to shut down at least 1 lane in order to widen that part?
Your Worship, there'll be traffic disruptions during construction. The long-term goal that is that it's 1 season of construction, and then you get the benefits going forward, and trying to get that season of construction in before you hit some of the potential peaks that are coming.
And my last question. So the bridge is just about to be open. The 2 lanes and 2 lanes. We haven't even had the full impact of having that fully open. So do we not believe that once that's open, the traffic going north is going to be a lot, that's going to alleviate a lot of this? And I guess that's my biggest concern. We haven't even had the bridge open to be able to see what the impact's going to be.
Your Worship, I guess there's 2 pieces to that, and the one's a little bit. It was comments made during IRTMP meetings and the modeling and the regional modeling that they were doing during that, is that what they actually model is that when the bridge is open, there'll be an uptick in traffic. Not a huge uptick, but there'll be a 5 or 10% uptick in traffic, because now that's the easiest way to go. Ultimately to that, some of the improvements we make and some of the backups we see along Veterans Way are the turning movements onto that piece. Where people don't want to use the merge lane or won't use the merge lane because they need to get over right away. And part of this widening is to create a right turn lane. That 3rd lane becomes the right turn lane from 101st on. And we're going to be extending that acceleration lane to match the on-ramp onto 95 into downtown to give people more room. So there's always a free flow lane on the right turn, and then you can merge over rather than having to try and merge into that yield when you have dual lefts coming at you, plus the cross traffic from 94th Street.
Okay, well, I'll see where the rest of council is. Councillor Harris, do you have any questions on this? Go ahead.
I do. I'm almost of the opinion that most of what you're talking about is really required from 101st Street to the 1521 intersection. So you're talking about ultimately adding a little bit more width ultimately so that you do have an unimpeded right turn flow. And in that context, I can support that element of that work, but I'm not so sure whether I support the whole concept of the widening to 6 lanes all the way through. I respect the fact that it's been modeled, but I'm not so sure I see the need for it. Would phase one, could phase one be done as just a one-off to improve the flow in and out of the ingress and egress out of the traffic lanes? Could that happen? And leave it at that? Because really, between Highway 1521 intersection and 84th Street, I don't see too many impediments. I don't see too many backups. Same thing even going south towards Southport Drive or Boulevard or whatever it is. So the question is, could you just do the phase one and leave it at that and see improvement there?
Your Worship, Councillor Harris, the short answer would be yes, and I guess that's kind of what's being proposed right now is phase one now, phase two and beyond coming later. I think we've slotted them back in starting in 2029 again. It gives a time to evaluate, I guess, as well, more time to evaluate to see what those other phases, when they're required.
Okay, one final question. Did you look at any noise attenuation for the residents that live beside the fire hall relative to having another lane of traffic that much closer to their properties? I know how noise attenuation works, but we didn't look at that because I know I'm going to get we'll all get questions about that.
Your Worship, Councillor Harris, we didn't do an evaluation on that, no.
Okay, and I'm not surprised. Okay, fair enough. We can answer it accordingly. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Blizzard, do you have any questions?
No questions, but I do have some comments. First of all, I think this section is probably going to be the biggest win of all the proposals. It's going to be I think it was 5-stage plan. So no matter what, it's going to take a number of years, no matter where we slot them in. And this one would be a good test if we did this stretch to see, like on the southbound or westbound lane, that not having the backup at the big intersection will help, I think, the traffic, and having that dedicated lane, or at least everyone will stick to the right to head across the bridge. And also, we only have a tiny little piece that needs to be changed to make the other side of it 3-way all the way from the one stretch to the other. I know that it's still a big job because the intersection's involved, but I think this is a great way to see, does this actually help having 3 lanes each way? So I'll see what others say, but I think I can support this.
Okay, and we're not actually debating it. There's no motions on to take it out or leave it in. So it's kind of clarifying questions with some minor comments. We'll leave it at that.
My comment is just, I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Councillor Nguyen, do you have anything further on this one? Mostly questions.
Thank you. Yes, I do. And I sense your excitement for the potential of getting this project underway, Grant, and I appreciate your answers so far. In the response to the flagged item, the report we got says that we didn't take any empirical data during heavy construction for this roadway. I'm just wondering why we didn't do that in preparation for a project of this magnitude in the scope of things.
Yeah, Your Worship, Councillor Noyan. So the comment was based on trying to determine the amount of shortcutting that comes through. So we don't. That's a tough one to always judge because where's that traffic coming from and going to? So we don't have any specific counts. What do have, I guess, it'd be anecdotal information that you see downtown. You see a lot more traffic coming through 99th Avenue during those heavy rushes. You see it coming off of 112. Certain times of day, River Road gets busier. Those kinds of things are things that we see, but I don't necessarily have a count that can show a spike in those locations.
Right, and I just think that might have been important for a case to for this project to go ahead. But I agree with what you're saying that we would probably have to look at traffic counts throughout more of or some of the collector arterial roadways that would bypass or be used as a bypass. Just in going back to the bridge opening and the impact on traffic, can you just make a comment as to why we wouldn't perhaps wait until 2024 for this project, if given that we haven't seen what the impact of the bridge opening is going to be yet?
Your worship, Councillor Doyen, so we slotted it back in here really to get ahead of the potential Dow expansion. We didn't want to have an overlap where we start hitting their peaks, because there will be significant traffic disruption to be able to complete this project.
Right, yeah, I'm satisfied with that answer. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Batoy. Any further questions on this one? Oh, sorry, it's early. Good Lord. There you go.
Thank you. So, Grant, just reading through the information that was provided, I realized that we're actually dealing with two different things. So, one is widening the road, but it's also the issue of collision. Now, when I look at this data, over 5 years, I think it's pretty high. And so what comes to mind is currently that intersection 15 and 21, it goes to 3 lanes, right? So that you can make the left turn or the right turn, wherever you're coming from. My question is, when we widen it, will that intersection go from 3 to 4 lanes? Because I feel like if we're going to be widening that intersection where there's been a lot of collision, that it could actually increase the collision or increase the possibility of having more collision. So does that go from 3 to 4 lanes, or is the widening just going to go from that 3rd lane all the way to the Veteran and 101 streets?
Your worship, Councillor Batoye, the widening goes through the intersection. I'm just trying to. It goes through the intersection, but the 3rd lane that's added drops off just after. And the reason to get through the intersection is to make sure we're done. We're not coming back into that intersection again. And then to get the benefit of having the extra lanes through the lights, so that you have 3 lanes moving through rather than just 2 at every green light.
Yes, I understand. But my question is specifically on the intersection, right? Because there's a 3rd lane that allows you to turn left or turn right wherever you're coming from. Does it become 4? Or does it remain 3?
Yeah, sometimes as you go through the intersection, southbound or westbound,
right,
you'd have 3 straight through lanes going through the intersection. As you approach the intersection, you'd have a right turn lane that would drop off towards the bridge. And then you'd have an acceleration lane on the other side of the intersection if you're coming from the bridge and turning right. So there's 3 lanes through in both directions. There's double left turn lanes through the intersection, and then your right turn lanes are prior to you get intersections.
So I'm not sure if you just said it increases or not. So
it does. It does. There's 1 extra lane through, yes.
Right. So doesn't that increase the potential of collision then? Because I'm going to tell you why. Because we do have a dedicated left turn north to south bound, but east to west, people can turn on left on green.
Your worship, the Councillor Batoye, so coming from 94th Street right now, you're allowed a left turn on green. And I believe that's the only movement where that's allowed. With the dual lefts, those are only done on a protective cycle, so only when an arrow's there.
Right.
So and it's the type of collisions we see, I guess. We're not necessarily seeing a lot of collisions in the middle of the intersection. People, unless they're running a red light, right? That would be the issue there. Rear end collisions we get, and a lot of that is people expecting somebody to merge and they're not. They slow down, they stop in a place they're not expecting, and they get rear-ended. So opening it up and having a little more free flow will hopefully alleviate that condition as well.
Okay, just one more question, and then I'll just leave it. But why do we not have a dedicated left turn from east to west? Because I'll really be interested in seeing the breakdown of this data you provided. Which of them we're going north to south, and which of them we're going east to west?
Your worship, so the one movement from 94th Street turning left, which is the one that you're allowed to turn on green, it meets the standard in terms of what's required for that left turn movement. It is a single left turn lane, so your sight lines are good there to be able to turn. it is. I know we're changing some signal timing there, and I think it's going to remain, but it is something that's been evaluated recently in terms of what the requirements are.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Macon, question? No? Okay, okay, so kind of a round two. Councillor Kelly, further questions?
Yes, thank you. Grant, do you have any update on the status of Vinca Bridge? It sticks in my mind that heavy trucks were prohibited on there a couple of years ago.
Your Worship, to Councillor Kelly, I haven't seen any updates in a long time, no.
It's still restricted weight, though, isn't it?
I believe it is. There was some preliminary design for a replacement, but I haven't seen anything for probably a year.
And I'm unaware of it as well. I haven't driven out there to check. I guess the point I'm trying to make is with the restrictions on Vinca Bridge, I'm sure we've seen an increase in heavy truck traffic coming through to use the bridge at our intersection. Does that make sense?
Your Worship, Councillor Kelly, I wouldn't want to comment because I'm not sure if we're seeing that or not.
I get it. I think it makes sense. Just to follow up, I think perhaps on Councillor Abatoye's line of questioning, when I look at the heat map for the accidents, pretty much the brilliant yellow section will be covered with phase 1. Is that correct?
Your Worship, Councillor Kelly, that's correct.
And phase 1 will include a rejigging of the intersection of Highway 15 and 21?
Yeah, there'll be a widening through that intersection, yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, and I have one other question. So if this makes it through the budget, will we make an application to the provincial government because it is highway and it's as a result of economic development in the Heartland region? Will we actually make an application to see if we can get funding for it?
Your Worship, I believe we will be looking to see what's available and how we can push this through. It's also in the ready construction phase of the IRTMP, which the Regional Transportation Master Plan, which has gone to the province. So I'd be hopeful that we'd be able to find something.
Okay, and I asked that question because I'm wondering if this is going through, if we need to do some additional lobbying. I mean, I look at Leduc and they went out and because it was their 50th Street overpass or something was in the IRT, they went out as collectively saying, you know what, this needs to be funded by the government, and they actually got most of it funded. So that's my question. What are we going to do in order to try and get the government to chip in on this? I maybe put that one through Mr. Fleming.
Yes, Your Worship, I think there is a few avenues we can explore. One would probably be around the Heartland table, just getting these municipalities to lend us their voice, because like you mentioned, it is a regionally significant roadway that supports the economic development of other municipalities around us. So I think having it come up at the Heartland table, having it on the IRTMP is something, and then we probably should look at a bit of a strategy for direct lobbying or direct advocacy from the municipality itself as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harris, anything further? You're good. Councillor Blissard, anything further for questions? You're good. Councillor Noyan, you're good. Councillor Batoye, go ahead.
Thank you. So at the peak of turnaround, when all these industries are doing their turnaround, do we know how many people are coming to the sites and using our roads?
Your Worship, Councillor Batoya, they usually give us a heads up to give us some rough numbers in terms of what will be coming in at different times.
So what would you say the range is?
Your Worship, Councillor, it's tough to say depending on the magnitude, but anywhere, you could have 500 to 2,000. It really.
It never gets up to 6,000?
I might need some help on that. I'm not sure in terms of what those numbers get to.
Okay. Mr. Fleming, did you?
Yeah, to Your Worship, I can confirm with Mr. Morrissey. I've heard ranges that go as high as 8,000 for very specific, usually short range periods of time.
That's what I thought.
I think the number of 5,000 gets thrown around a lot when you look at IPL, and there's a bit of a difference between a new build and a turnaround, even a significant turnaround. But anything that's in the new build range, the number of 5,000 seems to get thrown around.
Okay. Just two quick questions. So the first phase one also includes the Highway 15 and 101 street intersection. So we're going to be covering those two intersections.
That's
Perfect.
correct, yes.
Thank you. And my final question. So what alternate route are we going to be providing? Because South Fort Boulevard should be the alternate route and it's still not doubled. We have a plan, I know, to do that, but shouldn't that come first before we start to close the highway?
Worship Councillor Abatoye, so we won't close the highway. It will be restricted, obviously, during construction. There'll be some areas that will go down to one lane for short times. And we'll have to work on those detour routing through South Fort Drive, and hopefully maybe even some other routes outside of the city if it's possible. The South Fort Drive widening, that's they're levy funded projects, and it comes down to what kind of funding's in the levy, and still in terms of time, a little bit of timing on that. So it's tough to bring that forward without putting city money into that.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Macon, anything further? Okay, thank you. So there's no motions on this one for today, at least. Okay, we'll move on to the pedestrian crossing. Information's provided in your package. Councillor Kelly, did you have? Go ahead.
Thank you. It was subsequent to this, I believe, where Mr. Harder made his presentation about the delaying the installation of monitoring cameras at the Dow building to make it turn it into more of a citywide approach. I'm going to move that security cameras be added to this tunnel when it is built, and be part of the approach, citywide approach that Mr. Harder referenced when he was presenting to council on Monday.
Okay.
It's a rather roundabout, Cheryl. The salient part of this is I move that security cameras for a cost of $75,000 approximately be added to the underpass.
Okay, so I'll take that as a motion for an addition. So we will deal with that, and then we'll go on and see if there's any other motions. You can go ahead and speak to that.
I don't have a lot to add. The tunnel's going to be long. It will be well lit, I get it, but it's still going to be long, and it's going to be out of sight, and it's not subject to the added personal security that I think most people feel when they're in a public place. The tunnel is the sight lines, unless you're directly aligned with either the entrance or the exit, you cannot see what's going on in the tunnel. There's already been mentioned through administration that there's an effort to get more security cameras installed in the city of Fort Saskatchewan. We haven't yet asked administration why they feel that's important, but I'm sure the reasons are similar to my concerns with this particular tunnel. I think it makes sense. It's an extra $75,000 to $100,000. I get it, but in terms of a percentage of the overall construction cost, I think it's relatively minor, and I think it would add a great level of security to those that need to or are required to use a tunnel on a regular basis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I've accepted that motion. So it's open for discussion and debate. So I'll go through the order. So I'll support the motion for the security cameras. I actually don't support the pedestrian underpass. This was discussed way back when. This project has actually been talked about for a very long time. It goes back to even when Councillor Hutchison was sitting at this table. And as an RCMP, he said he absolutely didn't support underpasses. He says nothing good comes of them. He really spoke to the fact that pedestrian underpasses, just that's where things happen. And cameras, yes, we can record what's going on, and hopefully if they do go in, you get at least good resolution ones so that we can catch perpetrators when and if something happens. But I'll support the cameras. I just don't support the underpass. Councillor Harris.
Yeah, I can support the addition to the budget. I think it makes sense. There is no viable alternative to getting people, pedestrians, across that intersection if we are going to increase the volume of traffic that's going to go through that intersection with the improvements we're contemplating. So people are going to have to use some sort of an underpass because an overpass obviously isn't a practical solution. Grade separated intersection maybe, but the cost of that is way out of sight. So this is a fallback position I think we're going to have to accept. If people don't like it, I guess they will find other routes to get from the west to the east. So this would at least be kind of some level of acknowledgement that that there's some consideration for safety in the tunnel.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blizzard on the security camera motion.
Yeah, I'll support this motion. I'm going to echo Councillor Harris's comments. I'm not really keen on an underpass, but there are not any other options. We're a high-load corridor. Building a pedestrian overpass would be cheaper, would also cost quite a bit, but it would be cheaper than this, but it just doesn't work for us at this point. Before we do another one, it would be good to see how this one works and if it is safe, and cameras definitely are a must. I don't like a big brother state, but things happen around town that I think this is a great way to kind of monitor that and see if we can catch anyone that might do something.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen on the motion.
Yeah, thank you. I'll support the motion. I'll keep my comments short. It makes sense to have security cameras in this tunnel if it's going to be built to deter any type of incidents from occurring and also be able to see them if they do occur. So that's my only thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Batoye on the motion.
Yeah, before I speak on the motion, just 2 quick questions, Grant. So the design was done in 21. Does it include the widening of that road? As in, like, what would the depths be? Because I know we have the width and length, but what would the depths be?
Your worship, the conservatory, yeah, the design was done in conjunction with the widening design. Okay. In terms of depth, there's no drop down into the crossing. It is basically from the trails, it's at grade. The road actually raises above.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. No, absolutely support the motion. Totally makes sense. I know we've recently had some security issues about especially dark areas. And so I think having security cameras will definitely deter those people who have bad intentions. So I think it's very well, it's a very welcomed idea. So I support it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Macon.
Thank you. I will support the motion. I know that when I'm talking to residents about the possibility of this project going forward, the number one complaint I heard was safety and feeling safe sending their kids or themselves across. So I do believe that this is a good addition to this project.
Okay, thank you. So we are only voting on adding $75,000 to the project for security cameras. Please cast. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Councillor Kelly on close. And go ahead.
Thank you. Before I close, I do have one other question. I should have caught it the first time around. When I was questioning this Monday, it was administration that brought up the acronym CPTED. What is CPTED?
Your worship, it is crime prevention through environmental design. So the intent behind that is you design it so that you don't have blind spots. You open it up as much as you can. You don't want to put in things that are going to allow. You're trying to eliminate the hiding points or things like that where they're going to cause you issues down the road.
And I appreciate the comment that that review will be done prior to final design on the underpass.
We'll complete it probably to finalize design. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. I have nothing to add on close, Mayor Catcher.
Okay, thank you. Ms. X, are we using our... Okay, so the motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Are you done then?
For that particular, yes, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to just continue on. So because I did have a question on that one as well, and that was with regards to the graffiti. So you didn't put in a cost, what it would cost to do any sort of design work. I know in your notes you say it can be done at a later time. Would it not be more expensive to do it at a later time?
Your worship, I guess, and maybe I didn't put it clearly in the notes. So the intent would be that the surface will be treated or painted, or the surface treatment on it to at least when it happens to make it easy to clean up or to cover up. The other piece was that there's the potential maybe somewhere down the road of adding art to it. What those costs are always dependent on what that project is, and what that looks like and what type of project. I included in a picture. It was a picture of an underpass in, actually it was Amsterdam, where they tiled it and did something that way. And again, it creates that smooth surface where you can clean it up fairly easily, as a potential for, it could be maybe added to the project at the back end or somewhere down the road if that's something the city wishes to do.
Okay. All right, thank you. Councillor Harris, anything further on item 2? You're good. Councillor Blizzard, anything further on item 2?
No.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Noyen, you're good. Councillor Batoye, you're good. Councillor Macon, you're good. And Councillor Kelly, you're good. Okay, so we will move on to the third item, which is Fort Centre Park. And Councillor Kelly and myself both had questions on this one, so I'll let Councillor Kelly go first. And then I'm actually going to go in reverse order, otherwise Councillor Macon's always at the back end of questions. Okay. Go ahead.
I still support the concept of a path versus a stairway. Richard, I appreciate your comments, but as you mentioned, I think in your comments that the stairs work well for somebody that's fit. There will also be a bike track so that you can push your bike up or down, I assume. But young mothers with baby strollers and that sort of thing, or people with issues, don't fit well on stairs. As you get older, I'm not young and fit anymore, and I prefer a ramp over stairs as well. And also bike access, I think it works better. The costs seem to be about the same, and I guess that's a question. Is my understanding correct that the cost is roughly the same for ramp versus gravel path, gravel ramp versus gravel path
Your
versus
worship, to
gravel
Councillor
stairs?
Kelly, that's right. I mean, when you
Right.
look at the costs for gravel, based on the evaluation that we received from the consultant yesterday, in a very short analysis, of course, we're going to have to push this a little bit more because it's a little bit of a change. But the initial analysis was that it's pretty close to the cost at this time. Again, look at these numbers being very high level, quickly analyzed, and only for 150 meter, which is a straight line down, which is sometimes not ideal. So that's what we basically looked at in terms of cost, and it's about 150 meter for this trail, which is kind of comparable to the total of 123 meters of stairs we were putting in there overall, and then it's one path that replaced two stairs, if that makes sense. Now, if you do asphalt, like we said, that's possible, but we're going to need to do a little bit more work in terms of stabilizing, removing more trees and things like that. When you go with a, let's say, a path that is more like gravel and more natural, you don't need to move much more things. You can incorporate that into the path, into the environment. But when you get to a little bit more work with the asphalt, then you need to clear that path and remove all trees, and it's less natural.
And I'm not suggesting and won't suggest asphalt at this time. That could be part of stage 3 or 4 or 5 on that area when the demand calls for it.
Mr. Fleming's got his light on too.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, through your worship, I just want to make sure that the costs that were given, and Mr. Gagnon did mention it, the costs that were given were on a per unit, like a per meter basis for gravel versus stairs. But when you're talking about a switchback design, which you would ultimately have to do, you could be looking at about 4 times the length of the amount that it takes to get down. So the per unit cost might be comparable, but the overall project cost could be quite a bit more when you get into trail over stairs. The other thing, and only because we went through this so significantly, I think it was 2 elections ago when we were really questioned on why did we put stairs in another location. And so I don't know if I'll do a good job of explaining it, but in a winter climate, even when you're clearing the trails, there's usually a bit of shear on the trail itself. So even on a switchback, when you've got a trail that's going down, it can be difficult to traverse in the winter. But with stairs, you're talking, even if it's snowed and there's some ice, stairs are a flat surface that you traverse down, and stairs are actually sort of preferable in a winter climate for getting down, and it's a shorter distance to get down. So totally agree that from a full accessibility perspective that a trail is preferable to stairs, but when you factor in sort of winter and length, that's where the analysis sort of starts to come back a little bit closer.
And that leads to what was going to be my next question. Is it anticipated by administration that whether it's stair or path in the locations being referenced, that it would be cleared of snow during the winter?
In this case, yes.
In this case, yes. It would seem to me that if it's pathway, we clear it with machine. If it's stairs, we clear it with a shovel. Is that correct?
Your worship, to Councillor Kelly, I believe it's correct. If there's any other things for stairs, is correct? That's correct.
So I would think that the machine would be more efficient at the end of the day. I still support, I appreciate your comments. It's not an easy one, but overall, I think for the long term, I support the pathway over the stairs. I'm prepared to make such a motion, Mayor Catcher, just so we can offer comments and not just questions on this particular item.
Okay, you can put a motion on.
That try to keep it simple, Cheryl, that the stairs contemplated in phase 1 be replaced with gravel pathway.
Okay, and while she's doing that up, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, just put me back in order if there's lots of questions and comments, please.
Okay, so the motion will be that the stairs be replaced with gravel pathway. Okay, and I said I'm going to go in reverse order, otherwise everybody, so I'm going to go with you, Councillor Macon, on debate.
Thank you. Okay, so just to be clear, there are 2 accessible entrances, exits to this part, correct?
That's correct.
A gravel path, I am not sure would meet the fully accessibility that we would be looking for here, because I would think gravel is not the best for maybe somebody in a wheelchair or somebody in a walker or something, kind of a walking apparatus that makes them a bit more unstable. I would think gravel would not be I feel like if we did it, that it would have to be paved pathway if our idea was to be more accessible. Can you answer about like snow clearing in the winter on a gravel pathway? I'm assuming that's not as simple as if it's on pavement. Like, what do we use to clear a gravel pathway to an accessible standard?
Your worship to Councillor Macon, and I will just go with what I know at this time. If there's anything more or less, Mrs. But overall, I think we use the same, which will be a brush with the on a tractor to push snow on the side. A gravel pathway in the winter provides some traction for people to walk, so which is a good thing. So normally we don't use, let's say, salt or anything to remove the snow or to melt the snow. So that will be mine.
Good morning. So through your worship to Councillor Macon, yes, we use like a bobcat type of equipment with a brushing sweeper on it that would sweep the surface.
So using that kind of equipment, would we be required to replace the gravel yearly?
I know with a gravel trail, we don't clear as much snow down to the surface as we would for an asphalt. For asphalt, we go near to the surface. For gravel, we'd be raised a little bit higher.
Okay. Thank you for your answers. I'm really unsure about this. I do believe that we're meeting the accessibility by what we have there. So I'm unsure the benefit right now of adding that amount of money to the budget right now. I'll wait to hear what everyone else has to say.
Thank you. Okay, we're going in reverse order. Councillor Abatoye, you're next.
Thank you. So if we went with the pathway, the gravel pathway, it looks like it's even cheaper than what we have proposed as the staircase. When I look at your unit costs per linear meter, you have 581 per meter for staircases and gravel pathways 453 per meter. Am I correct?
You're correct based on what we provide you in this case.
Okay.
Again, it's in a concept of a simple pathway coming up and down, diagonal.
So, but it's like an S-curve, so it makes it easier.
Well, the more you S's, the more you add linear meters, and you could basically double or triple it depending on how you S this. And how you S this is to looking at a specific slope that is not too demanding for people to climb, for which we will have to have much more analysis on that. Again, this is very quick.
Right.
On what it will take to get people down on a simple pathway based on our discussion with the consultant.
So let's talk about maintenance costs for, again, staircases versus gravel pathways. How do that compare?
Your worship to Councillor Abitoye, can you please repeat your question?
I'm saying maintenance costs for both. How does it compare? Like you're having to clean the snow, clear it, just generally, what would that look like? Would it be the same or would it be higher for one?
Through your worship to Councillor Abatoye, I would say it'd be comparable. The life cycle of the two structures would be different, but through winter maintenance, one is laborious just because it's one person with a shovel versus a machine that's just going to traverse the terrain.
Okay, so that'll probably be higher. So life cycle, which is better? Which is longer?
Your worship to Councillor, it depends on the surface, I will say, and then the condition of the surface and the use as well. So if you're looking at an asphalt trails, we're looking about, I would say, every 25 years to look at replacing. And when you look at in my understanding of let's say earth embedded type of stairs, not the metal one, but the one that is embedded in the earth, it's about 25 years as well.
And gravel?
Gravel will be in the same.
About the same.
boat, yeah.
Okay.
You're good? Oh.
I'm just going to give a quick comment. It seems to me that the gravel pathway would help a bit more with mobility issues. And even though we're not very clear what the cost looks like right now, I'm actually open to exploring this. What is your own feedback? What do you think about the gravel versus the staircases?
Your worship, to Councillor Bitoye, when we started the design of this, it came from the recommendations that we saw in previous public engagement from the work that was done in 2020 that talks about staircase coming down to this. So this is what we provided the consultant. That's the information that came from the public engagement. Okay. How deep it was in terms of analysis between staircase and a pathway, I cannot comment on that. The only thing I can say is there's two access as well close by that people who have accessibility issue can use.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Noyan on the motion.
Yeah, in my opinion here, and from everything that I'm hearing, from a cost-based perspective, we don't really have enough information to go off because there's no design costing for a potential slope and the curve that would entail if we're going to go with a pathway at this point. So I'm just trying to get my head around the cost benefit of changing this design, and then also trying to evaluate the value of having a kind of a trail connecting system all the way up when we already have two trails for if we're just talking about accessibility. So are we still considering the metal staircase? Is that in the mix at all? Because that wasn't in the flag report.
Your worship, to Councillor Noyan, it is an option for council to look at. Okay. In the business case, in the budget request, we provided that option as an enhanced option to have a staircase.
Right.
So it's about, I would say, 10 times the cost of the.
It is. It's over $500,000. I was just looking at that figures, and that's quite a bit different. But who knows what we're even looking at with a pathway that we're talking about. So it's really difficult to gauge where we're going to be with it. I guess the other question I had, and this is how this pathway or staircase would tie into the design of the overall Fort Centre Park. Like, have we been in discussions with, say, the Nordic Ski Club as a potential interest to use this area? And then the reason I ask that is because then they would be grooming trails, and we wouldn't have to then go and sweep or snow remove on these pathways. Like, do we really know at the end what the utility of this park is going to be at this point?
Your worship, to Councillor Noyan, I believe this was addressed during the 2020 work on the public engagement on this, and I understand that they were very interested to come in, and I think it's a great idea for them to use the area as much as they can to bring the skiers over there.
Absolutely, and then in that case, we wouldn't be doing snow removal on the trails, for instance, right? Okay.
Like we do with other trails, we'll accommodate based on their program where they want to go. Okay. I mean, they're trying to do good things, which should keep people fit, so it's a good thing.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Blizzard on the motion.
Overall, I prefer the natural stairway, gravel stairway for access. I think we're going to end up, it was brought up that it's cheaper to do the stairs. I think we're going to find, because of the S, we're going to have it, I bet you it's going to be more than 4 times the cost, because you're going to need quite a bit more pathway, especially when you look at one of them 73 meters and the other one is, I think, 50 meters. You need a bit of a zigzag to get down that. So, unless you make it very steep, which then would not be accessible either, I don't like that. The other thing is, I wouldn't definitely not support 2 of them. Maybe if one of them was turned into an S, we could look at. But is there any way we can refer this and get some more information maybe later on, or can we put this off to the next budget meeting, which isn't until November? But I think we're all wanting more information on what the possible cost could be for an S gravel pathway.
So what we can do, because we're just as Councillor Kelly's motion is to replace the stairs with a gravel path. I mean, if you want to do a referral motion after everybody's had an opportunity to speak, you could do a referral motion on this one, but it's still not saying that it's fully supported until the actual budget comes back when we do our full budget deliberations.
Okay, yeah, at this point, I won't support it the way it is. I would need more information myself, so.
Okay,
I'll
well,
leave it
I
at
can
that, I
always
guess.
come back if there's a referral at some point in time. Okay, Councillor Harris.
The River Valley Alliance constructed a trail network in northeast Edmonton a number of years ago, and adjacent to the Quarry Ridge Golf Course, there is a paved trail for accessibility of bicycles and people pushing wheelchairs, things of that nature. But they also produced a set of what I would refer to as gravel stairs, which had 4x6s as the basic core for the rise and the run and the stairs, and then it was interspersed with gravel. And I've got a picture that I've sent to the city manager. We had an opening at the top of that staircase, which was also the top of the trail, the paved trail. And we looked across over into Strathcona County and said, you know, there needs to be a bridge here. And that is what ultimately gave rise to the construction of the bridge that is now coming in. So people can get up to the top of that viewpoint through either the trail, the paved trail, or which is then maintained and swept within their service standards in the city of Edmonton. And so I'm okay with that kind of a staircase as opposed to a metal staircase. I would prefer the metal staircase. I think it is the best way to go. The one in West Park is just fine. It doesn't need any maintenance in the winter. The only maintenance that takes place is the access at the top and the access at the bottom. Snow falls through the grate. People have complained that dogs can't walk up there. I don't really care. If somebody wants to walk up, they can walk up the trail, which is not too far away. So dogs are dogs. You know, they'll go wherever the master goes. So take your dog there if you want. I would prefer to see a metal staircase because I think in the long run it's less costly to maintain. But I would be okay if the grade from the cemetery down into that naturalized wetland area is not too steep, and we can get that type of a trail in there. I'm okay with that as well. So that's ultimately what would come out of Councillor Kelly's motion. Is that the way I'm understanding it?
That's correct. It would replace the stairs with a pathway.
You know, we built kind of a similar kind of stairwell at the pavilion in West River's Edge, and it's terrible. It's a paved stairwell. The rise and run is terrible. So somebody did it. They goofed up in the designs, and that should be replaced. So that's an example where we've got a natural staircase, but it's got pavement in it to give it a kind of an urban feel. It's terrible. It should be replaced. So whatever we're going to do in this regard, if this motion passes, I want to make sure that there's an appropriate design so the rise and the run does allow an appropriate up and down movement of pedestrian access. And the design parameters already exist, and the ones that the RVA used to develop that trail in adjacent to Quarry Ridge is a good. Go over there and walk it. It's fine. But that's got a fairly long ascendancy. So you start at the bottom close to where the paved trail is, and then it kind of meanders up the hill. And I think Janelle knows what I'm talking about. So if that would that work? Would that kind of that geographic distance be appropriate for this sort of thing? Do we have enough room here? Because that's got a fairly steep transition, and then it levels out of the bottom. Do we have the geography to do this?
So through your worship to Councillor Harris, we do have the geography in that area to accommodate the style of stair that you're referring to in both locations. attractiveness of that type of stair is that it's designed to fit into the geography of that area. The location that I just want to clarify, the location that Councillor Kelly is referring to is the middle set of stairs, and the southern set of stairs near where the jail memorial is. I believe we're still referring to that as being the natural earth stairs. So we would have two potentially different options there.
Okay, so by coming through the bush by the jail cemetery, that would be natural stairs?
The earth stairs, yes.
Okay, so going further over towards the fort, those would be
Natural as well.
Natural stairs as well.
Natural, or the option presented to council is steel. And I believe the motion here is from Councillor Kelly is to have a slope trail through there.
Instead of the stairs.
Instead of stairs.
Okay, just a second. Can you clarify that, because you're showing gravel stairs right now? So is that different than, just so that we're all clear?
I can provide some clarification, Councillor, and Your Worship. Currently, in the $1.5 million project, we are recommending there's two staircases. Both of them are hearth type staircase embedded into the slope, and so one is 73 meters, the other one is about 50 meters, and roughly about overall the cost is about $50,000. We provided a enhanced option. If you want to replace the stairs that is 73 meters, the one that is close to the jail cemetery, this one being steel, it's about $500,000 to do so.
$1 million?
$500,000, 500,000.
Huh? Seems high, but okay.
Again, there's and I think that right now the motion, and Councillor Kelly can speak to this, is potentially to remove the two hearth style stairs and replace with a path that will be gravel, and we will have to review that on our side.
Yeah, I'm not supportive of that. I could do an earth type stairway in both locations, which you say is reachable within your design parameters. We have an asphalt trail going down off of that observation area by Hanford House. What is that place? Anyways, so it goes down. And so we have a trail, so that provides mobility. So the steps allow people to walk down naturally, and I can support that. Having a trail going down the slope, nah, I'm not so big on that.
Okay, thank you. You're good. Okay, oops. Okay, I'm next in the speaking order before I come to you. So now okay, so you said steel. I think I got that. So then the alternative is, if council wanted the steel ones, it's $500,000 to add to the budget.
Your Worship, that's right.
And then the gravel ones with the wood around them, that's included in this budget.
That's right.
Okay. I don't have any more questions on that. So I'll go to Councillor Kelly for final comments and questions.
Thank you. Interesting comments. You're correct. My motion as it sits right now was referencing both stairways. When I re-examine the map and listen to the comments, truly my concern with the path versus the stairway, I just lost it, is the area coming out of Bridgeview. And I see Bridgeview as being primarily and hopefully into the future a younger family type neighborhood, a neighborhood where I would expect to see things like strollers. You're right, there is a asphalt trail, Councillor Harris, that is much further west. But it is also much further west. If you're walking, it's a fair walk, I would suggest. And based on the comments and I think good comments, by the way, that council has made, I think stairway proposed adjacent to or close to the jail memorial site. That's enclosed, that's through a forest, and to put a pathway in there, or a natural area, to put a pathway through the trees would be a much larger endeavor than putting a pathway down what I think is a relatively open spot toward the river off of Bridgeview. And I would amend my motion for council consideration to have the motion read, convert the staircase from the access off of, I guess it's 95th Street or Bridgeview, convert that one to path only, just the one. Because I don't think we need both of them. I don't think that.
Okay, so rather than amending it, just withdraw your motion, put in a new motion. It's just easier for...
I can, whatever. Cheryl, just change it however you see fit, please. Withdraw and insert a new one. And the new one would say the proposed staircase to the river area off of Bridgeview or 95th Street, and I think it's 95th Street, be converted to gravel path. I think it fits better in there, and it was the area it was on my mind when I made the motion.
Okay, so we'll give her a moment to do that. We do need a couple minutes. So do you want to speak to that motion?
I think I already have. Thank you.
Okay, it's a new motion, so I do have to go through the speaking order again. Councillor Macon on the new motion to convert the staircase from Bridgeview. Pardon? No comments? Okay, you're good. Councillor Abatoye?
I'll support the motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen?
Yeah, thanks for the clarification and for changing the motion, Councillor Kelly. This is what I originally thought the intention of it was, just to change that one. So I'm glad we cleared that up. I would be in support of this design. I think that makes sense. And then we have two very accessible routes going into Fort Center Park, and then a staircase in the middle. So it's a good mix.
Okay, so just before we go on, Councillor Harris had to step out for a moment. Councillor Kelly withdrew his motion, put a new motion on to convert the staircase from Bridgeview to be converted to a gravel path. Next in speaking order is Councillor Blizzard on debate.
Yeah, I won't support this unless I get some costs. I think that an S pathway is going to end up being quite a bit longer. So although it sounds like it's 150 less or 130 less per meter, we're going to need so many more meters of it. The slope is still very steep, so maybe we need some fill in there. I would need to see a cost before I could support changing this into even a gravel pathway. We are looking at our budget here. Costs for everyone are going up. This is going to affect our bottom line in the budget in some way, whether it's maintenance in the future. And I think we need to be careful this year. We don't want to increase taxes a whole lot. People are already struggling as it is. This could be done 5 years down the road or sometime. I think for now, I would just rather see the gravel staircase unless you can show me that it's not a huge increase in cost.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harris on the new motion.
I fully support stairs in that location. I think metal is probably the best long-term investment in terms of an access up and down. There is appropriate accessibility access into that area. I don't support a pathway going down the hill. I can live with a natural staircase that's built and maintained within a gravel context, but not a gravel path. It's too difficult to maintain, subject to erosion. I can see all kinds of problems with that. So let me read this. Be replaced with, no, I can't support the motion. It should be a stairwell one way or the other because of the grade.
Okay, thank you. I don't really have any comments on this one. Councillor Kelly on close.
Sorry? Okay. If we put a path in now, even though it's gravel, at some stage, it's my opinion at least, at some stage in the development of this area, the community is going to want to have an asphalt pathway and continue the asphalt pathway network that we have in the community. And establishing the pathway is the first step in that and saves costs down the road if, and I suggest when, the decision is taken to ultimately pave it. The stairs, they're just not accessible. They really aren't. They work, absolutely. That's why we have them in every house and every building that's built. But they're not accessible. And we are an accessible community. This particular area being open like it is lends itself to a pathway system. And is it more expensive? Perhaps. But there's a cost to accessibility. And if the budget is a concern, and trust me, this 10-year capital plan and the capital budget is a big concern to myself. And if it is a concern, and we're concerned that making it accessible tips the scale and it, on the economics, maybe we should be questioning whether or not in this market and this time and place, we need to be spending the budget on this park at all. I'm of the opinion that stairs don't work. I get Councillor Harris's point. They are efficient, no question, but they're simply not accessible. The pathway, it's open area, it's not that steep. My recollection of that particular area is that the slope is not that steep, certainly not as steep as the area by the memorial and the jail grounds. And that is why a pathway would work better. There's a cost to accessibility. This community has determined that we're going to be accessible, and I think we do it right the first time, and the right way to do it is a pathway. And I'll rest there. We'll see what happens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. Motion is carried 4-3. So that will come back in the next rendition of the plan. Mr. Fleming?
Yeah, through your worship, just so council knows, like this wasn't worded as a referral motion, but the way we look at it is we're going to take this, like some work will have to get done to look at the costing and whatnot. So we'll take that back and work with the vendor. And I think the goal will be to have this back for final budget approval, but we're going to have to work at the timeline of the contractors and the folks that can work this up. So we'll take it back, and yes, it will have to come back to council because the budget amount will obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, the budget amount may need to be adjusted.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to take a break right now. So let's 7 minutes. Hopefully that should be enough to 10:20. So we will recess for 7 minutes. Okay, the time is 10:22, so we'll get started here. I think we will.
He's the one who's got to talk on it.
Okay, so we're just waiting. Not sure if I hear him. We'll just wait 1 second, and if not, we'll jump down to number 6. So. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the next item that was put forward with some questions was the new columbarium. Councillor Kelly, do you have further questions, or were your questions answered?
I like the comment, Richard, about consistency. I'm not convinced that changing the design in the location we're currently using makes sense. I think it looks better to keep it consistent. I would just ask that administration consider maybe trying to raise them when we get to an alternate or a second location. I don't quite understand why it's important to be on the top level versus the bottom level. I suppose perhaps some of the thinking is that as we age, and if you want to touch it or get down close to make some sort of personal contact, it's just easier when it's higher than lower. And I welcome the comments. I think they made sense to me. I just ask that we consider it when we move to a second location down the road as the cemetery expands. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'll just see if anybody else has any questions on the columbarium one. I'm going to do this one also in reverse order, and then I'll go back to the original order. Councillor Macon, anything on the columbarium? No question. No. Councillor Abatoye? No. Councillor Noyen? No. Councillor Blizzard? Oh, just a second. Councillor Abatoye on the columbarium question?
Yeah, just a clarification. So the total budget was for 125,000, and I think you had said that it's for two columbarium. But in your response to the flagged items, it says that it's 40,500 per unit. So if we're getting a couple, what is the extra money over the actual cost for?
Your worship, to Councillor Bitoyer, overall the cost of the two units, both of them, is 81,000, so 40,500 each.
So, but for the request is for 125,000.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
And the second item is concrete pads to support them, and it was roughly, I would say, 20,000.
Okay.
And the rest is contingency.
Okay.
About 25,000.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Noyen, you had nothing? Councillor Blizzard, anything on the columbarium? Questions?
No.
Okay, thank
Nothing.
you. Councillor Harris? You're good. So the only question that I have, and it's not specifically to that, is when you're looking at columbariums and disposal of ashes, have you actually gone out and toured any of the other cemeteries in the Edmonton region to see what other options are available, whether it's scattering gardens, whether it's memorial benches where they put their ashes into it? There's so many options out there. So I guess, have you actually gone out and toured any places?
To your worship, we're aware of different memorial solutions for families. There's also monuments that we're seeing now in our cemetery requests. That's an individual columbarium for like a family of two niches. More thought will be put into phase one design of the cemetery when we move forward with that project in coming years, to give more options to the families.
Okay, so then second question. So then if a family member wanted to go out and buy, so they buy a plot, they could actually put a niche on their plot, and then they could put as many in it as they wanted? I'm just looking at what other options that people have.
Yes, that's absolutely an option for families, so long as it fits within our monument size. And typically they do fall within that monument size.
Okay, and last question. Will we ever look at a scattering garden as an option for families?
Yes. This is a proposed option in phase one of the cemetery master plan.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly, anything further?
Yes, please. I found your comments interesting. I did stop in rural BC. I did stop after about 10 times of driving past an old cemetery on the side of the mountain. What I found interesting there, because obviously it's very hard to dig, it's mostly rock, is that families would buy a plot and multiple generations would use that plot to bury just the urn. And they didn't have a big monument. They had a family monument, and then they would be racked up on the ground would be plaques to commemorate. I assume that sort of approach would be acceptable in our community right now.
Your worship, to Councillor Kelly, I believe so. Yes,
I believe so.
And we have a rate for basically doing a hogging job and then having somebody to having an urn going down into a plot. And my dad was buried this way.
And so a family could buy a plot, and we could designate that as the family plot if we saw fit, and accommodate.
Yes. And I believe we can go up to 5 urns into a plot like this.
Thank you.
If I remember well.
I'm sorry, I missed.
No, I was just looking at you. For the number of urns that you can put in the plot?
We will verify, but I believe it's 5. 2 for 1 in each corner and 1 in the middle.
Yeah, that's correct. That's for a 4x4 plot, and a 4x9 plot we can accommodate up to 7, depending on the size of the urns that are buried.
Okay.
Thank you. One last, just a comment. I'm not at all convinced that your $100 adjustment will influence the market the way we hope, but I'll leave it at that, and we'll bring it up and discuss it further when we get to user fees and charges later on in the budget process.
Okay, thank you. So we will move on then. Thank you very much. The next item is 92nd Street Trail conversion. Councillor Kelly, that was your request as well. So there was information provided. We'll just wait for Mr. Schaefer to come up. Further questions?
Yeah. Well, if we can't offer comments, Mayor Katcher, I'm going to continue to make motions so that we have the
No,
opportunity.
I've said we can have some feedback,
Okay.
but not
Okay.
like 5 minutes worth.
Sometimes it's difficult. What is, for the traffic calming on Greenfield Way grant, that's brand new, and we're council and I'm sure administration still getting both positive and some negative feedback on it. What is Plan B if, in fact, what we've done so far doesn't meet the objectives?
Your worship, to Councillor Kelly, I don't have a written or a Plan B in place yet. Something we'd have to evaluate as to see what potential future options or future problems are that we'd have to address in terms of specifically what that is.
And obviously, keeping some flexibility on 92nd Street south out of town could be a Plan B. And your comments, I think they were your comments, indicating that South Ridge Boulevard, the one directly adjacent to the Ford dealership, is supposed to extend east and tie into Allard Way, tie into 92nd Street. I think you said within the next 5 to 10 years?
Your worship, right now, and again, it's the developer timing, is assuming everything goes as they're indicating right now, we would have 92 Street will be extended out to Greenfield Link next year, and then we would do a temporary connection from there to 92 Street next year as well, just to provide that extra link.
And that's great, except if we close that one section of 92nd Street, extending over past the Ford dealership east to get to 92nd doesn't alleviate any problems that we're currently facing or have with volume on Greenfield Way. And it's not that I'm against the parkway behind on 92nd Street as proposed. I am against having it in the budget for this particular year, and I think we should delay it for a couple of years to make sure that the traffic calming procedures or efforts that we've instituted on Greenfield Way are effective in meeting the goal that we started out with. So with that in mind, Mayor Katcher, I will move delaying the 92nd Street conversion to pathway from the 23 budget to the 25 budget.
Okay, so that would be moving project 23030, 92nd Street pathway to, do you have a year or
2 years from 23 to 25.
to 2025. Okay, so as Ms. Exley's typing that, you may speak to your motion.
And it really is to maintain an option B if necessary. Southport area is going to continue to grow. The demands on Dillingham and Greenfield Way are going to continue to increase as the population increases in that area. And I am still concerned that we're not going to achieve the objectives that we're starting out with the changes we put in place right now. All I'm suggesting is let's not commit to a final closure of 92 until we see what's happening there, and it's only a couple years down the road. It can remain the way it is for a couple more years and not hurt anybody whatsoever. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is to delay project 23030 92nd Street Pathway to 2025. So I'm going to change up the order so that people have options. So Councillor Harris, I'll drop down to you as first on debate.
I think we've had a plan to convert this linear corridor into a trail. I support that. I understand what you're saying, Councillor Kelly, but at this point in time, I believe that the option we put in place for the roadway through that subdivision is going to work. People are going to have to slow down. They're going to have to be more diligent about their driving habits. I don't think we have to maintain 92nd Street as a fallback position because I don't see that happening in any regard, whether it's, I think it has to be converted into a trail. And we've made, I guess, commitments in the overall design for that area that this would happen. And I think now is probably the best time to proceed, personally.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blizzard on discussion and debate. I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just trying to look through some stuff here, trying to get my ducks in a row. I guess my concern there would be one of the reasons for doing it now is so that the developers that are building right now aren't all of a sudden finished and gone. They may not be in a couple of years, but I think, this would make sure that we don't lose anything. So I think I would rather see it converted already, so that we have that part of the trail done, and then we can go after the other developer and get reimbursement when they start developing. I think it's a good idea. I'm going to listen to other comments, but we'll see.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen on the motion.
Yeah, just a question. I know we went over the funding for this trail development. If the developers have moved out of that area, are we still able to levy them for a cost of the project? I know there's one that is not currently active, and the other one is, I believe.
Your Worship, the Council, and what we would do. So currently, the two developers that are active have this in development agreements right now to do the work in 23. What we would do instead, if this motion were to pass, is we would take their portion of the funding. We would have them, I guess, pay us. We would hold the money. The risk there is that we would then be on the hook for cost escalations if there were any over the next few years.
Right. Okay. So it would still be funded at this costing by the developer either way.
More or less, there's a little bit more risk to us because it's 2 years from now, and we would have to cover any overages for those other two developers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Abatoye on the motion.
You kind of spoke a little bit about the question I was going to ask. Now, what is the risk of deferring this projects? So obviously inflation, right? I think that's one thing. So, but what are the other risks that we face or opportunity costs?
Your Worship, Councillor Abatoye, I believe the biggest one is that that inflationary piece in terms of the project would likely come to us then to manage and to run. So we would have to tender it out at that point, and hopefully we're still close to where we're hoping for budget. But that I think is the biggest risk.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Macon on the motion.
Thank you. I don't think that I'm going to support the motion. We closed this portion of that street because of complaints and excessive speed and noise. So I don't know what would make us switch it back. What conditions would have to be there for us to switch that back to a road? I don't think that would be a viable option, even if the stuff on Greenfield Way didn't work. But as Greenfield Way is set up right now, I feel like we've thrown everything at it, but the kitchen sink. So if it didn't work, I'd have a lot of questions. I think it is going to work as designed, and I really don't find it necessary to leave 92nd Street open as a backup. So I will support this project moving forward.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any comments on this one. So Councillor Kelly on close. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I think that the traffic calming will have an effect on Greenfield Way as well. But what I think doesn't really matter. It's what actually happens that matters. And there isn't anybody in this room that has any crystal ball that can tell us for certain whether or not it will work. I know that the people that back onto 92nd Street, and one of them is a very good friend of mine, and he's concerned that it get reopened or not get reopened is be his choice. But he also has told me that he understands that it's a community issue and not just his issue. So he wasn't upset when I talked to him about it. Whether it's cars going by at 40 kilometers an hour past your backyard, or people walking down an elevated path at 3 miles an hour with an extra 10 minutes to stare in your backyard as they walk past, doesn't affect your privacy in my mind one way or the other. The funding is there for this thing. Grant, to the best of your knowledge, and approximately the total budget for that 200-yard section would be roughly how many dollars to convert it?
Worship Councillor Kelly, it's a little bit, so there's 200 meters that we're sharing, but there's another 400 meters or 300 meters to the north that would also get converted at the same time.
Okay, so the 200 meters that we're sharing is the area then, or the section that we would be facing an inflation risk on? That's what you're referencing?
No, it would be on the whole length, Your Worship, to Councillor Kelly, because the whole length that gets converted at one time. It's just the small portion at the bottom where we're.
So what would stop us from informing the developers that we don't want to do it for a couple of years and they can wait?
Your Worship, Councillor Kelly, and I don't know for certain. This is my understanding of how this would work, is that we have development agreements in place that outline some of the construction timelines. If we delay it and the developers aren't active in the area anymore, I don't know that we can go after the fact to get them to do it. We would be better off pulling the money now, having them pay the budgeted amount or their contract amount now, and then that would be the risk then for inflation over a couple of years. But I would be open to anybody else who could weigh in on that.
And I got that impression. Thank you, Grant. Mr. Fleming, please. Or Janelle, yes.
Through Your Worship, I believe Mr. Schaefer captured it correctly.
Okay.
Well, not okay. I'm sorry. There's a commitment of the developer to develop that into a pathway.
Your Worship, Councillor Kelly, by the end of October 2023, yes.
Is the commitment?
Yes.
And that's written?
That's written and agreed to, yes.
Okay. I'm starting to catch on. So do you think it would be a problem with them if we suggested that we wait 2 years?
Your Worship, Councillor Kelly, at the minimum, I would think they would want us to look at the escalations over that time to be covered. But that's a negotiating piece.
Okay, I'm There's two issues on Greenfield Way. I think we've addressed the speed issue with the changes that you've made. Your department has initiated. The other issue for the residents on Greenfield Way is the volume of traffic. And that volume is going to increase as the South Fort area in general builds out, and until we get a second access egress point, and that won't happen with the tying in of 92nd Street to Southridge. That's not going to happen. So we still are committed to only one alternative, and that's what, when we've thrown, I think you're right, Councillor Macon, we threw everything but the kitchen sink at it, which is the reason I asked what our plan B is. Because if it doesn't work, we don't have a plan B. And that concerns me greatly. So all I'm asking is, and maybe the correct motion should be, go talk to the developers and see what they say and come back to council and let us know how you were able to negotiate it. Because if it's contractually binding on the city, then it's not up to me to try to motion us out of a contract. I think that's a negotiation that needs to happen. So maybe the correct motion should be, let's negotiate it. And I'd welcome comments from anyone at administration, because I'm prepared to change my motion if necessary.
Mr. Fleming?
Yeah, through your worship, a referral of that nature would probably be better. And then it lets us go away and really what Mr. Schaefer's trying to do is explain that there is some risk in what you're proposing, and hopefully we haven't presented it like, well, it's a debilitating, awful, terrible risk, but there's risk there, and that's really the message we're trying to get across. But if this is done as a referral, we can talk to the developers, we can have a conversation with planning about, because a lot of this is around case law as it relates to what we can and can't force developers to do for offsite infrastructure. So if you do it as a referral, then it would give us time to go in and paint a better picture.
And Mayor Katcher, I would withdraw my original motion and exchange that motion or substitute a second motion that just asks for this to be referred back to administration for the reasons we've just discussed.
Okay, so I won't accept your referral motion because to refer this, then they need the motion on there. So you're referring your motion back for more information.
I can do it that way too if that keeps the chair happy. Leave the motion stand and let's refer it.
Okay, refer to administration to determine if negotiations, it has to be about Mr. Fleming.
Yes, through your worship, a referral, you can just refer the item. And so I would say take the withdrawal on the motion and refer the item.
Okay. Okay, so I'll accept the referral, or I'll accept the withdrawal of the motion. And so then you're putting a motion on to refer this item to administration now. The project 23030 for information for negotiation.
To report back on whether or not it's actually doable and what the cost of the city would be.
Okay, so referral motions are debatable. Do you wish to speak any further on speaking?
No, I think I've made my point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this is on the referral motion only. So Councillor Harris, you were next in order. Just a second. Go ahead.
I understand what Councillor Kelly's trying to accomplish. I think we need to move forward with the project as administration has recommended.
Okay, thank you. Just a second. Councillor Blizzard on the referral.
I also think that we should move forward with this and get the pathway in.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Noyen on the referral.
I support the referral motion. I would like more information as well.
Thank you. Councillor Abatoye on the referral.
From all indications, Councillor Kelly does have issues, and we also have heard from residents in this area. I wasn't going to support the first motion, but this referral motion, I think it makes sense. Let us speak to the developers and see what the options are on the table, and we can have that conversation at that point. So I support the referral motion.
Thank you. Councillor Macon on the referral. Go ahead.
I'm not going to support the referral motion. I do believe we should go ahead with this project. I don't think opening 92nd Street up is a viable solution should we need it later. I don't think that that would be an option I'd want to look at.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to support the referral motion either. I think it's being put in the budget. It's got good recommendations from administration about where the money's coming from. There is a development agreement in place, and I think it's. I think the neighborhood would be in quite disrepair if we actually open that up to a roadway once again. I think most of them are quite happy when we close that, so I won't support the referral either. Councillor Kelly, to close.
Thank you. I would just like to hear from one person in the room, please, what a plan B could actually look like. And I haven't heard it. I haven't heard it. And this is just about keeping options open. That's it. I support reduced traffic on Greenfield Way, and I support the closing of 92nd Street. I get it. But we don't have an option. If we bind ourselves with this construction project, we no longer have options. If Greenfield Way doesn't resolve itself like we hope, we don't have options. And the reason for this motion is simply to keep options. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. And the referral allows us to get information that tells us whether or not we have this option. It seems pretty simple to me, and I don't understand the panic. I really don't. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. The motion is now closed on the referral. Please cast your vote. Motion is defeated 4-3. All right, thank you very much. Is there anything else on this one? Not seeing anything else, we will move on to annual fleet and equipment replacement. Councillor Nguyen, you had the questions regarding this, so you received information. Yeah, further questions?
Yeah, I do. And I'll try to go through this as methodically as possible. So since referring this back to, or flagging this for administration, we've seen without prompt, one piece of equipment that was a street sweeper taken off as that was added to the fleet last year. And then you added under your report the analytics on a grader. Can you just tell me why that was added, as it does seem like that should have been included in the budget this year?
Your Worship, Councillor Nguyen, so in the text of the document, we made an error. The total budget number was right, but in the text, it shouldn't have read street sweeper. It should have read grader.
Okay, so that's a direct replacement then.
Yeah,
okay.
That's all that.
Yeah, I didn't read that in here at all. So, okay, I'll have two more questions and then I'll make some comments. I guess one other thing that I should have asked, and I'm not sure if you have this information, is for any of these three pieces of equipment, do you know how much, or if there was any critical downtime during work hours for these, or in the past year have they been service maintained and parts replaced during those windows of opportunities where they weren't working?
Your Worship, Councillor Nguyen, I know specifically on the graders there was some critical downtime through the winter months. We had a circle break that we had to replace that took significant amount of time on one of the graders. I can't remember if it was in this past winter or the winter before, but that was one of those items that has been coming up.
Right, and the grader is the oldest piece of equipment at 15 years in the three that I brought up for flagging, and that makes sense for that piece of equipment. Thanks for your response with that. Our policy for life cycle replacement, is that more or less, would you say it's driven by our agreement with the supplier for the buyback period and the guarantee, or is that something that is driven by your department?
Your Worship, Councillor Nguyen, it is driven by us. We use that guaranteed buyback as a piece of information because it helps us when we're evaluating different types of equipment, what we're going to get at the back end. So what's the net cost for one brand versus another, that kind of thing. What we find, the other pieces is on the, specifically like the loader and the backhoe. Those are the two at the 5 year. we do get a very good value on trade in terms of not just the minimum buyback, but we usually get significantly more than that.
Is that just recently due to market trends, or has that been for historically for a while?
It's been typically that. It's especially recently, but it's been typical that we've always been able to get a little bit better than that. The other piece we find is that when we buy those pieces of equipment, they come with a 5-year warranty. So warranty items are covered for the time that we own them. There are obviously wear and tear and things like that we have to cover that are outside of that. And then at the 5-year mark is where we start seeing in some cases those significant costs start coming in. I know the last cycle with the loader we extended a year, and then we ended up having a problem with the pivot point in the middle. Just those wear points become a little bit more critical as we start getting beyond the 5-year.
Okay, so just with the buyback guarantee, if we could go back to that, that's probably a linear depreciation that's built in. Would that be correct in saying?
Your Worship, Councilor, I'm not sure exactly how they calculate it when they write that into their contract.
Okay, but you would. The reason I ask that is because market values for used equipment, vehicles, fleet type equipment is really gone up in value over the last 2 to 3 years significantly. So that buyback guarantee that we have on any piece of our equipment, that could be actually under current market value for it as well.
Your Worship, the Council, and that's what we've seen is that those buyback numbers are actually low from what the current market is.
Right. So then, do we have? I don't know if it's a policy, but are there any other options that we're considering for disposing equipment at the end of its life cycle besides that buyback guarantee?
Yes, Your Worship, through the Council, and so we. When we dispose of the equipment, when we tender it out, we'll tender it with a trade-in value to see what they would give us on trade. Does it make sense? If we don't like that number, we can go to auction and hit fair market that way. So we do compare auction prices to what we would get on trades, or even if the market changes and maybe we sell back to the original supplier at the guaranteed buyback. We don't have to necessarily buy the next one from them.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Thanks for answering those questions. So what I've seen in the analysis of these equipments, and then I'm going to make a motion here, is our loader is currently at 5,700 hours. That's about 1,100 hours per year that are being put on that loader. Obviously, it is a critical piece of equipment for what its use is in the city of Fort Saskatchewan. After this year, we'd probably be looking at about 7,000 hours on that piece of equipment, and there's 7,500 maximum on that piece of equipment for buyback guarantee. Correct?
Your Worship, Councilman, that's correct.
Okay, and then I'll ask a question about the greater loss because that's a new one, but I don't think I have much on that given the age of that piece of equipment. But for the backhoe loader, just over 2,000 hours on that piece of equipment, and it's more used for utilities and cemetery plot digs and whatnot. That's relatively light work. I think that piece of equipment is being used for. So in my opinion, there's quite a bit of useful life on that. So I would like to make the motion that both the loader and backhoe are removed from the loader and backhoe loader are removed from project 19027.
Okay, so the loader and backhoe loader?
That's correct.
Are removed or pushed back, like if you're
pushed back 1 year. Let's
are moved to 2024.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. So you can speak to your motion.
Yeah, I think we've had some good discussion here right now, which has answered a lot of the questions I have on our fleet management policy and how we're doing things in Fort Saskatchewan. So I believe I have a fairly good understanding of the life cycle of equipment, how that works, and what we can see the useful life of our current equipment on. Obviously, these are large pieces of equipment that carry significant dollar values in acquiring them. I did flag this because Councillor Kelly raised the point about our 1 year or keeping skid steers for 1 year for at 700 hours. In my own experience, my own skid steer has 5,000 hours. I've replaced parts in it, and it's been quite economical for me to do so. I understand in municipal function, it's more economical to do things a different way, but I think we can do things a little bit better. And based on the numbers that you came back with, I think it's very advisable that we stay with those two pieces of equipment for 1 more year.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is now open for discussion and debate, and it is on the screen. Councillor Abatoye on the motion.
Question for you, Grant. So 5 years. So just going to the loader first. So 5 years will be 2023. So does that mean that the total number of hours on the loader is going to max out at 7,500 by the life cycle when it's supposed to be changed out?
Worship Councillor Betoye, so with this motion, we'd be replacing it in 2024. Given lead times, it would be fall of 24 likely before we would get it.
Yeah. So my question is,
so we'd be adding 2 years of life and 2 years of hours.
I understand the motion. Yeah. My question is, by 2023, when it should be changed out based on what's in the current capital budget, will this equipment have reached its maximum number of hours? It's currently at 5,700, right? So by fall of next year, would he have hit the 7,500 threshold?
Worship Councillor Betoye, by fall of next year, we're probably in the 7,000 range.
In 7,000 range. How about the other equipment? The backhoe. It looks like that has lots of hours left in it.
Your Worship, on the backhoe, we're probably, based on averages, about 2,600 by next fall.
Okay, I'm just going to think about this a little.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Macon on the motion. Go ahead.
This is not what I know a lot about. So this one is a little bit difficult. I am looking at the financial impact of doing this on the budget. It's coming out of our fleet and equipment reserve and the disposal fees. So there's no increase to our budget to do it this year. So I'm just curious, what do you think the risks are if we delay this?
Your Worship, Councillor Macon, and it's, I guess, not explained well in the supplemental information, but the loader project itself also included a snow blower as well. There were some other pieces involved in that budget. So it's not just the loader; it's also the self-propelled snow blower that would be part of that project. So that's the biggest risk that I see, is that we don't get that piece of equipment as well. That's something that I know the roads is looking for in terms of to help with the residential snow clearing. So that's the one piece there. Beyond that, you run the risk if you defer to 2025. The buyback is based on number of years and hours. Would beyond that, so that the buyback wouldn't be a guarantee, but given market, I think that you'd still be in that same range. I don't think that that's a huge risk there. It comes down to, it's 1 more year, it's that many more hours, does something break, and that's something I'm not going to say will happen because nobody can predict that. It's just your risk is that.
Okay. I too am going to think on this. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly on the motion.
Thank you. Grant, as I read your information, the guaranteed minimum buyback that you reference, both parameters must be met. It must be 5 years or younger and have under those stipulated hours.
That's correct.
And if we exceed either one, the guarantee goes away.
That's correct.
Okay. The snow blower that we budgeted to acquire fits on the larger new model loader?
Your Worship, Councillor Kelly, that's correct, yes.
Do we currently use a snow blower in the city?
Your Worship, we have a smaller one that we have on that we're continuing to use. This would, as part of the blower, we were going to make that one or keep that one, and we're moving some other equipment around to make room to add a larger one.
So if we acquired a larger snow blower, presumably there's some efficiencies to be gained somewhere. That's why we're doing it. What are the efficiencies?
Your Worship, it's a much higher capacity in terms of amount of snow we can move per hour, into cubic meters per hour. I mean, in a urban section, you still have to fill trucks, so you don't get the full benefit of that. But the bigger one is its reliability. It is a much bigger loader, blower, more robust. We don't end up with the breakdowns that we have on the current one, trying to chew through the ice chunks and things like that, just because it is more robust.
I have seen snow windrows in the center street being removed with front end loaders and trucks, which seems to be rather inefficient. The new snow blower would do that as well?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Through your worship, excuse me, if I could add to
Go
what
ahead,
Mr.
Ms.
Schaefer.
Smith.
If I could add to what Mr. Schaefer said, we found last season, when it was a particularly challenging season, that the blower was maxed out during the really busy periods. So our hope is with the new blower, we'll have a more efficient tool, and our goal is really to right size the equipment.
Okay, thank you. I don't know much about equipment either. I like to run it when I have a chance. I'm going to leave it at that, Grant. I think the information is solid. Let's see how it works out here when we vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm not going to support the motion. Worked in public works for a number of years, 17. Was actually part of the equipment replacement reserve when we started it up a number of years ago. And we always heard about optimal times for exchanging equipment out. And, every year through those first 17 years, and then even now on the 12 years as council, it's always the question, when these pieces of equipment come forward, is it the optimal time? I'm just going to say this is the one area that I really believe we have to put our trust and our faith in the people who are utilizing this equipment, who are doing the mechanical repairs to it, and know when they're going to get good value to have it exchanged out. And back in the day when they said, well, we should do it every 5 years, I questioned that too, but it seems to have worked out really well, and I'm sure Mr. Rogers sitting back in the corner there would attest to that. So being that I have some history in this, I do support administration's recommendation on this, because if we don't get the optimal exchange for it, and we put too many hours on, or something does break, then we will actually end up probably keeping it for years and years, or we just won't get the trade-in value for it. So for that reason, I can't support this motion. Councillor Harris on the motion.
I can't support the motion either. It's coming out of an equipment replacement reserve. It's not impacting the budget from that standpoint. I reflect on the expertise of the people that work for the city that deal with this equipment on a day-to-day basis. And if we have a policy, and I was involved in that policy not quite as long as you were, but long enough to know that I trust the expertise of the people that have to use the equipment. So in this case, if this is the optimal time to replace it, and it makes economic sense to do so based on trade-in value and the agreements that we have with equipment providers, then I would not support the motion from that standpoint.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blizzard on the motion.
I understand where Councillor Noyen is coming from, because I had the same feeling when I asked questions a number of years ago about this very issue. When I buy myself a car, personally, I like to run it until I don't need it. But the only risk with doing that is myself, whether I rent a car because it's got repairs or have to find a ride. When we delay some of the equipment replacement for our community, the risk there is roads not getting done or us having to contract it out, slowing down a job site with things that are going on. So I don't support this motion. I believe that the staff does do careful analysis on the costs and the benefits and the values. I don't want to see the equipment break down while we need it. I like my roads cleaned and I like the work done on time. So the other risk, I think, is also, when we work on it now with the supply chain issues, it could take a little bit before we actually get it. So by delaying it, who knows when we get the equipment. So I think it needs to be done in a timely basis with the 5 years, and then not delay next year's requests that also will come forward. We just be adding to them.
Okay, thank you. I see Councillor Kelly's got his light on, so I'll just see if there's anything else on round 2. Councillor Abatoye, anything further? Okay, Councillor Macon, anything further? Councillor Kelly, I lost your button. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Councillor Blizzard made a good point. If I lose my car, it's just me sitting at home and or calling a cab. From the city's perspective, we have a service level that I think we're trying to maintain, particularly with things like snow removal. I know everybody in the community appreciates that. The question I have is, if we have downtime, we're losing our operators. So what do we pay an operator per hour to run this equipment approximately?
I would
Ms. Smith?
Approximately.
Do your worship, 35?
35 plus benefits, so we're in that 50 range. So downtime is approximately 50 hours of per hour, $50 per hour of labor opportunity costs we've lost as well. So I appreciate Councillor Noyen looking at this. I really do. It's a significant item on our capital budget every year. I'm not sure, though, that we can afford to skimp on what I consider to be major pieces of equipment. And the loader with the snow blower, I think, is a major significant piece of equipment that we should have. So I think I'm going to have to vote against it, unfortunately. Your motion this time, Councillor Noyen, unfortunately. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing further. Councillor Harris, anything further? No. Councillor Blizzard, anything further? Councillor Noyen on close.
Yeah, I appreciate the discussion here. The intent of my motion was to perhaps find an efficiency and build up reserves a little bit more for our equipment and fleet when there is going to be larger and then larger dollar figures of equipment that need to be looked at to be purchased. I don't necessarily agree with everything that's been discussed here in the opinions. The guarantee buyback and the warranty period for this equipment right now is not of any significance, seen as the market for used equipment is probably higher than agreements that we signed for buyback 5 years ago on this equipment. I can appreciate the fact that we need equipment in good working order, but an economical way to do that is to repair it and keep it well maintained as well. So I guess part of me it does get concerned in a way too, as a councillor, the optic of residents watching a $750,000 loader driving by their house when a lot of people in Fort Saskatchewan are going through economic difficulties, and that's part of the reason behind my motion. But I'll close with that. I'm not withdrawing my motion right now, based on the discussion we've had.
Okay, thank you. Motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. Motion is defeated 5-2. All right, thank you very much. So we will move on to the 10-year capital budget for further discussion and debate. I'm just looking at the time. Okay. Sure. I understand lunch is here, so if council wants, we can take, 45 minutes? Okay, so that would bring us back at 12 noon. So we'll break for 45 minutes for recess and have lunch. Okay, thank you. Okay, the time is 12 o'clock and we will resume our October 6th regular council meeting for budget. So the next item that we have is the long-term 10-year capital budget, anything that is left on that. So the process will be any notice of motions that will be coming forward. And I am advised that because the agenda packages go out today, they're hoping that if they're introduced, it'll be to come back on the 25th. If there's anything in the long-term capital budget that you see as something you'd like move forward, if there's any following questions that anybody has, this is sort of the time now that that we go through with this. So I'm going to start where the top of the order actually was for this morning. And Councillor Macon, do you have anything further on long-term capital budget?
I just have one question. Is there any projects that are on the 10-year capital budget that can be shovel ready so that we can jump on grant opportunities when they come up?
Mr. Fleming?
Yeah, through your worship, there's nothing that I can think of that's sort of at that design ready stage that's we haven't discussed for the 2023. My answer to that question would have had been for the last little while that the Veterans Way expansion would have been one, but if that's coming into the current year, then I wouldn't say we have a design what by definition is shovel ready. When grants do come around, we do sometimes find ways to make things shovel ready. The transfer station would be a good example of that, but as of now, I would say there isn't a good candidate that I can really think of. Perhaps the 95A traffic calming, but
okay. No follow-up. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly?
Yes, I do. I wonder, is Jeremy here? Jeremy's here, I think. Perfect. Hi, Jeremy. We're looking in the wrong place. Can you tell me, when you did the operating impact for the capital budget items, some of the bigger ones, perhaps a new swimming pool for an example, when you budgeted the operating impact, what's included in the operating impact? Is it full cost of operation or what?
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly. Ms. Andruko, do you have more details on that?
So it could depend on the type of capital project, but the most common ones are transfer to reserve for future life cycle, maintenance costs for equipment, contracted services, and supplies. So we do kind of look at what are the operating costs to bring on a new asset, like anything that's involved.
Okay, so back to a significant one, like perhaps a new swimming pool. What, for example, was included in that operating impact?
Off the top of my head, I don't quite know, but I can look it up.
And that's fine. I didn't expect you to have it memorized. While you're looking, and come back to me, Mayor Katcher, please. But one last question just on that particular subject. What inflation rate did you put into your calculations for the next 10 years to account for inflation and operating impact? And you can look that up too. I'm content with waiting.
So the inflation would be around 3% is what we assumed.
Well, around 3%, is it 1 or is it 5?
Well, 3.
3? Okay, thank you. Okay, please come back to me, Mayor Katcher.
Okay, thank you. I'm next in the speaking order. So first I'm going to make a comment on the shovel ready. I would think that the Heritage Precinct that went out for tender and that got cancelled would be considered a shovel ready, even though maybe administration or council don't consider it at this point in time. But would that not be considered a shovel ready?
Yeah, through your worship, because there is a design that has been done, it could be considered that, yes.
Okay. I just like to put that out because it's always skipped over, but it was something that actually went out to tender but got canceled. The Heritage Interpretive Center.
Which got killed by
It got delayed. But anyway, it's still considered a shovel ready. And I just want to make that point. So the other question that I have is, I don't see anywhere in the 10-year capital budget where we're looking at paving Henderson Park parking lot. Where would it come and why is it not in here, since it's really the only playground that doesn't have a paved parking lot?
Through your worship, that would have to be a capital project that would be added because we're not replacing existing asphalt, we're creating new asphalt. It just hasn't been contemplated at this time, but we could take it back and give it consideration.
Okay, so I would just like to do a request for information on what the cost would be. I'm not flagging it, I'm just asking for information, and depending on that, I would potentially put a notice of motion on at the October 11th meeting.
Yeah, we could look at unit costs for similar projects and apply it for that site.
Mr. Fleming?
Through your worship, that's what I was going to say too. We can look at the unit costs from this year's road rehab program and give a ballpark, and then it would be your choice to use that for a motion.
Okay. Yeah, if we can have that information by just as information emailed out, I can maybe do a notice of motion on the 11th. Okay, Councillor Harris, you're good for now. Okay, Councillor Blizzard.
Nothing for me.
Okay, Councillor Nguyen. Go ahead.
I just had a question on interest rate of our debt and the fluctuations over the past year. Can you just give us those numbers?
Through your worship to Councillor Noreen, are you talking about existing debt?
Yeah,
or
existing
through
debt,
the 10-year capital plan?
Yes. So in the 10-year capital plan, there's a proposed debt limit use of 20%. So that's just for 2023. So I guess new debt then is a better question, because that pertains to the 10-year capital plan then, right?
So the interest rate that's in our 10-year capital plan is 5.02%.
Okay. And then my second question is just the impact on residential mill rate due to the increase of the operating impact, assuming that we're approving the capital plan this year. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, the question is what will be the mill rate increase with the operating impact of this capital plan?
We don't have the mill rate increase right now. We have to finish off the operating budget and then get some final assessment numbers as well.
Okay, that's fair, and it can wait till then. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Abatoye?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. My first question is, what percentage of our revenue are we going to be using to service our debts? And I know that we're looking at 10 years out, but I'm really specifically interested in 26. Would you have that number? I said, what percentage of our revenue do we anticipate we're going to be using to service our debt? And I'm thinking specifically 26.
Through your worship, Councillor Abatoy, I think we'd have to take that back and provide a specific answer.
Okay, sounds good. And my second question, and just looking at this, and just wondering, why did we, because I look at 2026 and I see how it seemed like we put a lot of high tickets projects in that year. And just looking at the impact property tax revenue increase over the 10 years, 26 is 10.97%, and that's just capital. It doesn't even include our operating. So why wouldn't we spread that across board rather than just stack it up in that one year? Why don't we stagger the projects?
I will defer that to Mr. Fleming.
Yeah, through your worship, that certainly could be a strategy that we would employ. We didn't want to assume a strategy like that when we put this plan forward. We wanted council to see the impacts for each year as they stand. But if it was decided that there was going to be a significant project done, whether it be recreation or utilities or whatever, impact smoothing is certainly a strategy.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just wondering, with my first question, I just thought maybe you had the number. Are you able to provide that number for the 10 years? Is that possible? Just the percentage of our revenue that we're going to be using to service the debts for the 10 years. Thank you.
Was there, is that to come back? No, I'm just asking with yours, that was a question.
Yeah, through your worship, I said we can bring that back for all 10
Okay.
years.
Okay. No, I'm going to go around again. Okay. So, Councillor Macon, anything further? You're still good. Councillor Kelly?
Yes, please. Thank you. Mayor Katcher, I need to comment on this. So what's your opinion on comments? Questions don't quite cut it.
What are you commenting on?
A 10-year capital budget.
Go ahead, make a comment. We're kind of at that everything in the bucket.
So that, and I agree with you. I just didn't want to get into a debate with you in about 3 minutes, so I'll go ahead. I'd like to refer council to the responses provided by administration yesterday, and in particular, the spreadsheet toward the end, and prepared, I think, probably by Jeremy and his team. And then, in more particularly in that spreadsheet toward the end, where you'll see three highlighted lines. They're in peach color, I think, for lack of a better description for color. And the last highlighted line, which is the new additions based on a request of myself, it says total cumulative capital spend plus operating impact. You find it, Lisa? I'd like everybody to be there before I start. So
I'm gonna look that up on here because I have an old copy. That's all.
That's
yeah,
right.
the old copy will not have this. It'll be in the response received yesterday.
Opening it right.
So here's, I think Councillor Abatoy touched on it. The total spend for capital based on this particular budget for the 10-year period is in excess of $305 million. Our 22 operating budget, if we take our operating budget and remove utilities out of the budget, so the budget remaining to look after administration of the city, roadways, parks and rec and culture, policing services, fire department, snow clearing, everything except utilities. Our 22 budget was $60 million. We are budgeting in this plan $305 million, or 5 years worth of operating budget in a 10-year period. We can only do that by significantly increasing our debt. I think the plan is way too optimistic. I think getting our debt load up to close to 60%, and given the way construction projects work, they never come under budget. That's always over. We can safely assume that this is probably a rather conservative percentage. Adds way too much risk to the balance sheet of our city. I do believe strongly and actually fairly emotionally that council needs to look at this 10-year plan, because I don't consider it to be financially prudent. We simply can't do it. I think council needs to be prepared to move some items. And Mr. Dance, I'm looking at you. It seems to me when we went through the new policy for capital plan that we now have something called a looking at list or an abeyance list or something like that.
Through your worship to Councillor Kelly, was termed horizon list.
I'm good with the term horizon. Thank you for refreshing my memory, John. Some of these items on here need to be moved from the 10-year capital plan to the horizon list. We don't know what interest rates are going to be. I think they've jumped to 5.5%. That's what the County of Strathcona informed us at their last borrowing cost them, and this is 4 months ago. It's just way too much risk all around. I understand the difficulties of putting such a massive budget together. I absolutely get it. A great deal of assumptions have to be made. But at the end of the day, council has to look at it critically. And a 10-year capital plan that consumes or spends, let me put it that way, spends 5 years of our operating budget in a 10-year period just for capital, commits this city going forward, should we live with this plan, to being potentially financially handcuffed, I should say, not handicapped, I take that back, handcuffed for the years subsequent to year 10. And our flexibility in how we operate our city and how we look at taking on new projects as they arise and new programs as we deem them necessary based on demand in the city becomes very complicated, to say the least. So I would welcome comments from my fellow councillors on that. And to get the discussion started, I'm going to suggest, and if we need a motion, Mayor Katcher, I'm going to take it, or I'll make it, that for a start, the budget item 29008, new arena, be put on the horizon list for the time being, and administration can bring it back at a date when it seems appropriate. And consider that a motion, please, Cheryl.
Okay, so we will deal with that motion. All right, so budget, so the motion is that budget item 29008 for an arena be put on the horizon list. Okay, do you wish to speak further?
Not at this juncture. I'll wait for comments from the rest of council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll actually go next in the speaking order. I'm not going to support that motion at this point in time. I believe there's 5 studies that are coming forward. The long-term capital budget, in my opinion, right now, until those studies come forward, otherwise we would put all of these items on a horizon list, including the secondary water one, the everything that's in the future when we talk about widening roads, all of those are all go on the horizon list. So I guess my question to Mr. Dance would be, am I correct that the 5 studies will be coming forward that will deal with several of these?
To your worship, yes, and that's been mentioned a couple times in the presentations that there is secondary water, fire master plan, recreation, JRC design and options, neighborhood rehab, and then additionally some work being done on materials handling and snow dump and the annexation area technical infrastructure studies. So those are all planned for some time within up to mid-2023. Also remind council that part of the policy change as well with the operating and capital budget was a dedicated session and time in June to continue to look at the 10-year capital plan. So not just during this period, but also a comprehensive look in June of each year as well.
Okay, so we will actually be discussing these items in June for review. Okay, so on that basis, I just don't see any point on moving a lot of these items personally, unless we see those studies that come forward, that we have an opportunity to take a look at them, and then we can make an informed decision. So I won't support the motion at this time. Councillor Harris on the motion.
I'm fine with the timing the way it's presented, so I've got to think about this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blizzard on the motion.
Yeah, I'm not going to support it. The way I see it, I think we spent time last year debating, should we even have a 10-year capital plan? Should we have a 5-year? I like the 10-year. To me, this year we have binoculars. We're focusing on this year. Next year we widen it. Or what we're doing right now is looking wider at the next following 4 years. And then 5 years after that is already a bit of a, maybe you could call it near horizon. So it's not a given thing. Each council will look at all the items as they come up. And then we have our far horizon. I'm okay with the way it is, and I won't support this motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, I appreciate the intent of doing this, and I agree with many of Councillor Kelly's comments. I just had a question for you then. Are there many items that you would wish removed from the 10-year capital plan right now? And then would we be going through those one by one through successive motions?
I'll allow you to answer that.
Thank you. At the time being, this is the only one I have. But let me make this point. I think it behooves each councillor to state that, or acknowledge at least, that they're comfortable with a 10-year plan.
Okay. I'm just going to have you answer.
5 years of annual spending built into a 10-year plan.
So point of order, Councillor Kelly asked you a question. You answered the question. You'll have an opportunity to close on your motion. So he answered your question.
Thank you, and I appreciate that response. Yeah, I'm okay reevaluating this document in June myself. I think we did that fairly effectively last year, and that's the time for discussion for it. I do appreciate the intention of this. I'm not sure which way I'm going to go on this right now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Abatoye on the motion.
Thank you. So just going through this 10-year capital plan, I was a little concerned about our ability to afford all of the things that we have on here. And that's why I asked that question about how much of our revenue is going to be going towards servicing the debenture. But I do agree that, the 10-year capital plan is a work in progress. Nothing is really static there. But to be honest, looking at this document as is, it does look scary. But without really having the full information, to be able to remove things from it right now, like I wouldn't support just removing one project. I agree that a few studies are being worked on right now, so we can make a fulsome decision on going forward. But it is required by the MGA to submit a 5-year capital plan, not a 10-year capital plan.
Through your worship to Councillor Abatoya, so it's a minimum of 5 years.
Minimum of 5 years. Okay. Like even looking at 5 years, like that 10% freaking scares me. Like I can't even imagine coming to the residents of Fort Saskatchewan and saying, "Hey, your property tax increase is going to be 15%." That's going to be ridiculous. But it requires that we plan. And planning also requires that we have the adequate information, which I don't think we currently have, just because of the work that's currently ongoing. And then I think we can make a fulsome decision. So based on the motion on the floor, I wouldn't support that motion. But this 10-year capital plan critically needs to be looked into, and to ensure that we can actually afford all that we've put on here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Macon.
Thank you. I'm not going to support the motion as it stands on the floor right now. I do support what you're saying. Absolutely. We are not going to spend $305 million in the next 10 years. That is for sure. But I don't think that we can truly remove anything and make any good decisions until we have the results of all the work that's being done right now. And I think there's a good chance that by June that we would actually have quite a bit of that to have really a true conversation about where some of these projects are going to go. So for that reason, I'm okay to leave them in here for now, because I do believe that we are going to have that more wholesome conversation once we get more information back.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go to Councillor Kelly on close.
Thank you, everyone. Mr. Downs, is there a study in the 5 that you referenced? Is any one of those looking at a meaningful way at the DCC arena?
Ms. Cowie?
Based on the work that council approved that we're doing right now, that the DCC arena will be included in information that will be brought back to you before the end of June.
What information are we expecting, Heather? I do not recall a specific discussion on an arena.
So when we did through your worship to Councillor Kelly, when we did the report and the pathway of looking at Harbour Pool and then looking at the other assets of an indoor recreation, the arena was included, fitness was included, as well as a pool. And we'd be looking at it from a program perspective. What is the actual program that residents want? And then what do we need to do to build or not in that respect? And I'm just, maybe Mr. Babiak, did I get that correct?
He was shaking his head, yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All righty then. In that case, we can defer making decisions for another year. When we get all the information and the entire community wants everything, which I know they won't, but when they want everything, then we better be prepared to tell them that we're going to spend a whole whack of cash and mortgage their future. It's that simple. So we got to be prepared to cut, or we're infringing upon years 11 to 20 at least. This plan can't continue the way it's written. Simply can't. 5 years on council, the capital plan has been an issue of mine for 5 years. Every time I try to tackle it, there's a reluctance to make any changes whatsoever in a 10-year capital plan. I fail to understand why. It is just a 10-year capital plan. You can add stuff onto the capital plan just as easy as you can take it off if you're looking out 4 or 5 years. It is really years 5 to 10 a wish list, period. To hand this forward to the community, I think it's actually a good thing. I hope the media picks up on it. I hope there's some discussion in the community about the merits of spending $305 million over the next 10 years, assuming everything works fine and the budgets are met. I look forward to some communication with citizens, and you know what? I'll explain my position. I will listen to them and act accordingly. Thank you.
Okay, the motion is now closed. Please cast your vote. Motion is defeated, 6-1. Okay, so I'm going through hopefully the last round on this. So if there's any notice of motions or anything else, this is the time to do it. I have nothing further. Councillor Harris? I'm going in order, in the rotation order. Councillor Harris, you're next. Can you push your button?
As it relates to a future potential capital project, I want to propose a notice of motion that would come forward to council on the meeting on October the 25th. Do you want me to read it in?
Yep.
Okay. At the October 25th, 2022 regular council meeting, I'll bring forward the following motion. That council directs administration to allocate $70,000 from the Financial Stabilization Contingency Reserve to study the feasibility of constructing stairs near the Chabot Park lift station into the River Valley. The study would include 1, defining options for construction materials, 2, high-level geotechnical evaluation of site conditions, and 3, Class 5 estimate for the project along with operating impacts. And that the report from this analysis be brought back for consideration before the end of 2023.
Okay, thank you. So that'll come forward on October 25th for direction. Council, do you have anything else on the long-term capital budget, or are you at rest now?
Cool.
You're good. Councillor Blizzard?
Nothing for me.
Okay. Councillor Noyen? Councillor Abatoye?
Just one quick question, just on the aquatics construction on the 10-year capital plan. Is there a reason why we have nothing in 25? Because I'm seeing 4 million in the plan for design. I'm assuming that's for design. So why are we not? Why is the next phase not right after? Why is there like a time in between before we go on to construction? I know it's just a plan, but I'm just wondering why.
Yeah, through your worship, there was the thought was that that's an election year and that could potentially you could do the design and some of the detailed work. You could get more accurate costing, and then there would be an opportunity for a plebiscite if that's the direction that council chose to.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Macon, anything further? You are good. Councillor Kelly? Go ahead.
Notice of motion, Mayor Catcher, but it's not budget related, so I would ask that you come back to me when the budget is over, discussion is over, and just before adjournment. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're pretty well there. I don't see anybody else has got any questions. Shares regarding operating? Yes. Did you want to save it for the operating budget? No? I want some action on this very quickly. Okay. So, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. At the October 11 regular council meeting, I will bring forward the following motion. That council direct administration to research the estimated costs for the use of an independent third-party vendor to facilitate the annual city manager's performance review, and that this information, along with a proposed overview of the process, be brought forward during the 2023 operating budget deliberations for inclusion in the annual operating budget for the office under the heading Office of Elected Officials.
Okay, just before we go on, I'm just going to check procedurally because the agendas actually go out today. So would it be, I'm sorry, but would it be more appropriate for this to be on the 25th? Otherwise, it would be potentially a walk-on item. Mr. Fleming?
Through your worship, the agendas went out yesterday, so it would be sort of a walk-on item. It's at the choice of the mover. We were suggesting notices go to October 25th so that it can be on a council agenda and be better communicated to the public, but it is the choice of the mover.
Councillor Kelly?
I don't think there's anything in this particular motion that needs to be communicated to the public. I'm referencing a chore of council that is an annual chore of council held in camera. So really, I don't consider it one of the very, 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 very few things that we'd undertake as a council every year that is truly in camera and by the way, a council responsibility. It's one of the things that this council and no council can even.
Okay, we're not debating the merits of it, just the timing, because the agendas have gone
so
out.
in short, I don't think it has to wait till October 25th because I don't consider it a public matter. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll leave it on for October 11th. That will have to be an amendment to the agenda as a walk-on item that council will have to approve at that time. Okay, so I think we are at the end. Mr. Dance, do you have anything to sum up?
Thank you, Your Worship. There's a couple motions that were made, two motions specifically for council that will be reflective of the updated capital plan. And I believe there's 3 or 4 information requests that we will follow up with in the next couple days and get back to council. So our next time for budget would be operating budget on November the 16th.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just confirm the information requests, they'll be out beforehand. So in the event a notice motion wants to get put on the October 11th.
we'll endeavor to do that. We're end of Thursday day today, Friday, Monday holiday, so the 11th or the 25th. So.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. So thank you, everybody. Look at that. We are officially adjourning the meeting at 12:35, and you have the afternoon available to do whatever you like. We are adjourned. Take care. Have a good day, Councillor Blizzard.